this will be released post Super Bowl. I am rooting for Tom Brady.
Oh no!
Why not?
Oh no!
Why not? He's the greatest
quarterback.
quarterback.
To see his face.
It's been nice talking to you. I have things to do now.
Welcome everyone to the Scuttlebutt Season 2, Episode 2. So good to have you along with us. My name is Ryan Ahl. I am the host of the Scuttlebutt. I am with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a small nonprofit here based in Pittsburgh, PA. Our mission is to bridge the military-civilian divide by connecting veterans to educate, heal, inspire, and we're here also to educate you, our civilian audience. I am a civilian. Becky, one of our hosts today, is also a civilian, but we are also joined by some military veterans. We're going to talk some military headlines, dive into some acronyms, and talk a bit about that term that we keep saying on the Scuttlebutt, military-civilian divide. What is that? We're going to get to that a little bit later in the program, but first, I'd like to ask that if you have enjoyed the Scuttlebutt, if this is your first time at the Scuttlebutt, but you want to connect with us, please do share, subscribe, like, ring the bell on YouTube. You'll be able to be the first to get our episodes as soon as they are released every single Monday. And also, if you want to email me, you can do that at sean@veteransbreakfastclub.com. I'd love to hear from you. And we always like to go through our mail and talk about them on the podcast. So please do that if you have the chance. But first, I'd like to go around here and introduce everybody, and you get a sense of who is with us today. First up, you never know who is who in the Zoom room and what the order is. So if I point here, or point there, or point there on YouTube, you're not going to know who I'm pointing at. So I'm just going to go to Becky first. And Becky, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, good morning, Sean and everyone. Thanks for having me again. My name's Becky Nyren. I am a Gold Star wife. My husband, Nathaniel, served with the U.S. Army and was killed in Iraq in 2004. And this is, I think, about my fourth time on the Scuttlebutt, and I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. Ryan?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Ahl. I'm an Army veteran. I was deployed to Iraq in 2004 and 2009, and I currently work for a government agency assisting veterans, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ryan. Haya?
My name is Haya Eason. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served enlisted from 1981 to 1990, and I'm currently employed here in Bethel Park. Thank you.
Awesome. You guys are all rejoining me, so I appreciate the fact that you like me enough that you'll come back and spend some time with me. We'll go into our first segment here. It's what I like to call Where in the World is the U.S. Military? This is a segment we started with Season 2. I can't get the Carmen Sandiego tune out of my head whenever I say that title, though. So if there's a different title that I can think of, I will probably end up going to that. I'm going to share my screen here so everybody can see the map that we have been using. And this came to us from the Smithsonian.com a couple years back. They started a U.S. Counterterrorism Activity Map. These are places in the world that the U.S. is currently or was involved in counterterrorism activity. You can see by the map, it's very a large amount of area that we are covering. There are several icons on this. And just to get everybody on the same page, there are blue stars that are built military bases, or what they call lily pads. There's a yellow target for when we have U.S. troops there training and assisting local forces. We have a sort of a green recycle, which is U.S. military exercises. We're doing military exercises there. There's a sort of an orange burst, which is actual combat against terrorism or counterterrorism activity. And there's sort of a red top-down view of a drone to signify where we've actually had drone strikes. Last week, we talked about Germany, which I think is a very sort of simple country to talk about in terms of why do we have U.S. bases there. Obviously, we have them there because of World War II. We sort of went over that. So if you're interested in hearing more about why we have bases there, check out episode 1 of the Scuttlebutt. But today I thought we'd go for a little bit more of a difficult country, and we're going to pop south from Germany into the African country of Tunisia. And Tunisia, it's very interesting there because we may not have heard about U.S. operations there had it not been for the Task and Purpose article. They did a Freedom of Information Act because there were 2 Marines that were commended for valor during what seemed like a, quote unquote, I say, my term, a secret gunfight. Because there was sort of conflict that happened. And because of this commendation, that's where we sort of found out about this. Well, let's rewind the clock a bit, but in Washington in 2015, Washington classified Tunisia as a major non-NATO ally and allowed for reinforced military cooperation. Flash forward a bit, February 2017, and American Marines battled al-Qaeda militants in western Tunisia along the border with Algeria. A Marine and the Tunisian soldier were wounded, and 2 other Marines were commended. And this is how we sort of found out about this. Now, Tunisia has been a bit shy about confirming that American operations have taken place in country, and I've read because that's in fear of attracting more extremist violence. But the United States, on their end, they have withheld details because of classification considerations, force protection, and diplomatic sensitivities. This is from that report by Task and Purpose. I did want to ask you, Ryan, can you clarify what those terms mean? Classification considerations, force protection, and diplomatic sensitivities.
So I think to kind of fully understand this real quick, because this is nothing happens in a vacuum, right? Everything that, historically in the Middle East and North Africa, right, we have had a rocky relationship. And very few countries, when we're talking about diplomatic sensitivities, very few countries are really willing to come out and set themselves as an ally to the United States because of that legacy of colonialism and the interference of Western countries in the Middle East and the Sykes-Picot Agreement and all those things, all these historical factors that go in there. So I think certainly the diplomatic sensitivities have to do with Tunisia trying to remain a strong partner in the region and being friends with its neighboring countries, as well as also continuing to have good diplomatic ties with the Western world, which can provide it with a whole host of benefits. Force protection is a typical military term used for all sorts of protecting United States forces wherever they are, and there's all sorts of considerations for that. There's operational security, there's physical security, all sorts of different things. So when they talk about force protection and the confidentiality of that, we don't want it to be common knowledge how many forces we have there and where they are and what they're doing, because that could put them in danger. Essentially.
Yeah.
That's the main thing when you talk about the confidentiality and its aspects and relationship to force protection. And there was one other thing. What was
classification considerations?
Oh yeah, I would say classification considerations. I think is tied into both of those.
Okay.
Either force protection or diplomatic sensitivities.
Thank you. That definitely helps clarify a lot of like why we're trying to protect that relationship a bit and maybe not make it fully public knowledge. And so, though the United States and Tunisia have sort of quietly expanded and deepened their security and counterterrorism ties over the past several years, roughly 150 Americans are training and advising the Tunisian counterparts in one of the largest missions of its kind in the African continent. Now, Tunisia shares a border with Libya and Algeria, and that border can be a bit porous. So I think Tunisia needs a little bit of American assistance in securing those borders. And then there's also Libya there, which the Libyan National Army is supported by the Russians. I think that's another concern of American forces. So there's a lot of moving parts there. We're not going to dive into all of them, but that's just sort of like a reason why the U.S. needs to have sort of a presence in Tunisia, it seems. And that has been extended, as in January 2020, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper signed a 10-year military cooperation deal with Tunis, Tunis being the capital of Tunisia. This is very much in a nutshell, again, the idea here of where our forces are on the planet. We're going to keep jumping around. If our listeners are watching on YouTube and see this map and they say, you know what, I really want to know about this particular country, please reach out to us and we'll do some research and try to figure out why certain operations have happened in country. But otherwise, we'll keep jumping around the map and keep highlighting different spots. But I'd like to jump forward to our next segment, and that's our word phrase of the day. Last week, we threw a curveball and ended up doing mission creep, which I now understand, love it. But I also came across this very interesting acronym, which might be the longest acronym I have seen thus far. This comes from the Marine Corps, and it's JJ did Tybuckle. And I think everybody who might hear that would probably give that sort of dog head nod, like, JJ did Tybuckle? Like, what does that mean? Well, it's an acronym for remembering the Marine Corps leadership traits which Marines are frequently tested on at the OCS. Now, there are a series of YouTube videos that go through each one of these. And Haya, being our resident Marine here, I'd like to ask you what these terms, through JJ did Tybuckle, mean to you as a Marine. Now, the acronym stands for judgment, justice, dependability, integrity, decisiveness, tact, initiative, enthusiasm, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, and endurance. Haya, do any of those stand out to you as like, that's definitely a really important one, or are they all sort of bunched together as they're all important?
You know, what I did was I looked at each one and I thought about what my boot camp training and then my school training and then my service active duty time was like. And I thought, well, if the goal is to have you to know and exemplify all of these at the point of boot camp graduation, you probably get a glimpse of each one. And the longer you're in, the more important it becomes, and you learn more about its relevance. Like, this is why we need to know how to become 1 through 14. And depending on what your field is and whether or not you're serving in combat, others are going to stand out more. So, you know, courage. You can say, oh, well, I was, you know, courageous enough to sign up. I made it through boot camp and my training. Now I'm going to combat. So it's a different level of courage that you're learning. It's a different level of dependability and leadership. You may have to become a leader if the person over you becomes injured or killed. So I think it's this gradual growing and maturing in the actual traits. So it's interesting that this is for OCS because it's for primarily leadership, but really they're training everyone in some capacity to know what these things are and to grow and mature in them so that they can see the significance and the importance, because lives depend on it, not just the reputation of the military, but lives depend on it.
Mm-hmm.
So this may be low-hanging fruit here, but is this the Marine Corps just like overcompensating for being like the smallest service? And how do they ever expect Marines to remember this long acronym? Right, even in the Army we have a shorter one, but
what is the Army one?
The acronym is leadership: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage.
I like JJ did Tybuckle just because it's more fun.
Is that to remind Marines to tie their shoes?
Oh.
Shots fired.
I'm just kidding.
Friendly fire.
Oh, but I will say this. I did think, you didn't ask this, but I did think, where does the military, at least when I served, where does the military lack in these traits? And I had integrity and justice.
Yeah, that's something we discussed kind of recently in the past couple episodes of this podcast. We've discussed some of those situations where that's certainly the case.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think loyalty can be a problem. I experienced where the military taught you to be loyal, and then they didn't know how to be loyal across the board. It was loyal to the military, and that was it. They didn't know how to be loyal to the people around them and the other people that they served. And it may have had to do with immaturity, but I did have a conversation not long ago with someone, and I said, you know, we cannot, I'm saying that we do, but we cannot expect for a person who has lived in a certain environment for 18 years to then go to a military boot camp and not be affected by what they had been taught and trained at home or in their community. And boot camp does not undo some of that. They try, or they're hoping that, okay, now you're at a different place. So now what you've learned, you need to kind of scale that and determine, well, this won't work with this. But a lot of people don't. They hold on to both. And so there's that undercurrent underlying how they really feel about things that you probably can't see in uniform.
God, that's such an interesting take on it. I didn't think to reverse it and see what is the military lacking in these ideas, or where they need to pick up their game a little bit. Do you think that all of these terms? Do you think that they are the ones that make a great leader?
There's a phrase in the Marine Corps that says, the Marine Corps makes men. And I say the Marine Corps makes Marines. You make a Marine based on the training and the teaching, but manhood and maturity and integrity, hopefully you have an inkling of some of those things when you enlist. And a lot of people don't. And some people do. But you can't control a person's home environment prior to their enlistment.
Right.
You cannot. So then the expectation is, as a leader, if you're training 50, 60 Marines, male, female, actually any branch, and you learn the personalities and the, I don't want to call them quirks, but, about the people that you're training over this 8 or 12 week time frame, some of your leadership training should be showing you how to get to those people as well, how to bring them out of what they may have been in, to bring them to a place where we can all serve together. And that's really what I think the intent of boot camp is. And for the most part, I think it does an excellent job. But we can see with recent headlines where some of that, some things are either not addressed or not addressed enough to say to people, here's what your conduct should be with this title.
And does that kind of go along with a lot of us saying that maybe all young people should serve in the military for 2 years, especially those young people who may be going down the wrong path, that they need some discipline and some integrity? And maybe we should encourage, I know a lot of other countries require enlistment service for a minimum of 2 years. Is that kind of a segue to what we may be talking about later in the civilian military divide or something like that?
That's a great question. I personally think, I think if there were some sort of mandatory service, not only would it teach you respect of the country, but I think the military has such a strong training process that if you're lacking in some of, I say, these traits, you're going to learn something about them. You may not become that, but you will learn something about it.
Yes.
Ryan, you've done some training, right?
Yeah, quite a bit. And what I thought was interesting about what Haya brought up with the different elements of the leadership traits, right? Of all of those letters of the acronym. What's interesting is that in so many situations, you have strengths and weaknesses. Everyone does in those categories, and you're going to run into situations in life and in the military and in leadership positions where you kind of have to sacrifice one of those in order to achieve another one, if that makes sense, right? Like, I'll give you a very non-controversial example. I was enlisted for about 11 years, and then I became an officer. And when I was a company commander, I had a soldier, who was failing his PT test, and you had to pass your PT test in order to re-enlist and continue to do his job. Well, my responsibility as the company commander was to make sure that our unit could do its job. And this guy was especially important to doing a very specific thing, to helping out the whole unit and the unit we supported. And so I'm sitting there trying to figure out, like, if I don't, bend my integrity a little bit here to make sure to give this guy a grade to keep him in the service, right? Everyone will suffer. Everyone will suffer because he won't be here to do that job, because there's nobody in the pipeline to replace him. And if he's not here, then we can't do our job. And that's the overarching piece of it, right? So you have, like, there are situations where you have to, you have to prioritize those traits in some situations, and it's, that's why, you get paid the big bucks to be a company commander, right? To make those decisions, I guess. I don't know. Was it the right decision? Maybe not, but I prioritized mission accomplishment over the PT test, I guess.
It's so interesting because so much of what I hear and understand about the military is very regimented. We're going to do it this way, and it's right and wrong, but these gray areas that exist in basic training, in combat and different things, boy, does the military leave it up to the individual to make the gut decision, and then you sort of have to deal with the consequences after that?
Yes and no. I think yes and no. You have well, one of the greatest quotes you ever hear is that the studying the U.S. military doctrine doesn't help you because the military practices chaos on a daily basis, right? The great thing about what the military does is it prioritizes mission accomplishment. However, you need to do that to get that done, and it gives you kind of the freedom and the tools, hopefully, to do that, right? The doctrine is kind of treated as this is a way, this is the way we would like you to do it. But if that's not working, then find a different way, because accomplishing the mission is more important than anything else.
A guideline.
Yeah, it's a guideline. Another tool for your toolbox.
Right, exactly.
Because the gentleman said, mission accomplished, getting the mission accomplished is the priority. And because the military trains us to turn on a dime, the priority then becomes, yes, the mission accomplished. Then you kind of turn around and say, what could have been done differently? What could have been done better? What worked really well? And unfortunately, I'm saying unfortunately, there are those who, I don't want to say get left behind, but they don't get tended to immediately. Maybe over time they do, but as a unit, you want that box checked that says mission accomplished. And then you go back and, tend to your wounded, so to speak.
Sort of clean up and figure out individually how different jobs could have been more efficient, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
You have to go back and see how the individual in the group of 20, 30, 40 people needs to be either taken care of or better taken care of, ultimately, so that the mission can be accomplished more effectively. And I have to be honest and say, when I was in the military, I did not agree with that statement. Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished, because the second one is welfare of the troops. And I've always said, well, what about the welfare of the troops and then get the mission accomplished? But you can't do that in combat. You can't do that in combat. Because if you don't have everything you need, but you have the physical bodies, you can still go at the battle. It may not be pretty and you may not win, but you can still go into battle.
Great. So we're going to jump to our headlines today. Today, it is one headline coming from military.com. It seems that the VA has released their budget proposal for the coming year. I thought I'd jump to Ryan to talk us through kind of some questions about it and some topical critical issues that they highlight in there. And if there's anything that we'd like to question, I think we should bring it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're doing some more focus on, enhancing mental health services and suicide prevention efforts. We've definitely seen that. I know we have additional staff members at the VA hospital locally here to help do that. Rebuilding VA infrastructure, increasing benefits for surviving spouses of disabled veterans, service-related environmental exposure, such as Agent Orange and burn pits, things like that. All of these are, we're going to continue to probably see an increase in costs for the VA, given the conflicts that we've been a part of for the past 20 years, right? Like that is a cost of war. That is a cost that will continue to go up. And for many of these issues, such as Agent Orange or whatever is going to become a presumptive condition for exposure to burn pits and those illnesses, those are things that we're going to have to pay for the remainder of a veteran's life, including, you know, big one, mental health services and suicide prevention efforts. You know, those are costs that are not going to go away anytime soon. This is not something that you just pay for one time and then it goes away. Like, these are services that these service members are going to need for, you know, the remainder of their life. So I don't think we can expect to see a reduction in the VA budget for a long time, right? This is the down the road cost of you know, 20 years of the global war on terrorism. You know, you have to now take care of these veterans who have served.
And we should specify that this is an $11 billion increase that they are proposing from the previous year. And it's a good point you make about the global war on terror, as the organization that presents the Scuttlebutt is also going to present a weekly Zoom program called Generation 9/11 at 20 that I will host. We're looking for post 9/11 veterans to come on that program, and we're gonna go a little bit more into the weeds into those stories. Where Scuttlebutt, we sort of talk a broad spectrum of military topics, and in Generation 9/11 we're going to talk more specifically with the veterans and the stories that they have from the last 20 years. Quick plug, as that was an aside. But back to the VA budget. Becky, does anything stand out to you about this proposal?
I just know, as a Gold Star wife receiving survivor benefits, it's such a gray area. I don't think it's communicated very well to those of us where the money's coming from, the increase or the decrease. I know most increases are based on cost of living through the federal government. I just looked at my statement yesterday, and there's another fund that was added that I don't know where that came from. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'll take a little bit more money, but it's just not communicated well to those of us receiving benefits where the increase is coming from, and I'm not sure I know where to go to find the answers to that.
And it's confusing.
It is. It's very confusing. Like I said, don't get me wrong. You know, the survivor benefit and the death benefit, for those individuals who ultimately need it, it's not that much, but we'll always take money where we need it. And I know several years ago, the cost of the increase didn't go through. It typically goes through, you know, December 31st for the following year. And there was I think a 2.5% increase that year. And I had to fight for close to 6 months to get that increase. And I wasn't fighting for me, because 2.5% isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. But for those young people who lost a spouse while serving in Iraq or Afghanistan, that extra $30 or $40 a month might be a deal breaker. And I know I had to call Keith Roth's office. I called the Vice President's office of the United States. And it took about 6 months to get an answer, but it's a shame that it took 6 months to get a minimal cost of increase for those people who really need that money.
I'm glad that you know, as a person that's receiving benefits, that she said she doesn't know where that's coming from. I'm a veteran and I still don't know where it's coming from. I mean, it's not as if I need an itemized sheet, but you know, I'd like a nice simple pie chart that shows where the tax dollars are going. And then we know that from year to year and from conflict to conflict, those numbers are going to change. So when you had asked, I think at the beginning of the segment, where about VA, you know, services, it's, you know, my view is I don't know how to determine, even in my own mind, what's critical if I don't know what's critical and how rapidly that's changing. And I think the general public, that helps with the civilian military divide, because it's not just they served, they need benefits, and then we pivot right and we're thinking about something else. This is a continuum of active duty reservists and veterans and retirees that are living in this country. And we kind of break them up into pieces and parts, and there's no continuum of it.
Thank you for that setup, Haya. That's a great pitch right across the plate for us to jump into our main story, the military civilian divide. But I don't want to like shortchange the VA conversation. I think that there is a lot of information. It's a very confusing. I think anybody you talk to, you ask about the VA, a lot of people again give that sort of dog head to the side look of like, well, what? Not only what is the VA, but, and I believe Becky, your camera may have frozen on us, so we will get you back live in just a minute. But I want to say that next week we are going to do on the Scuttlebutt an episode that's focused on the VA. We're going to answer some questions about that. I believe we're going to have somebody on from the VA just to sort of help you. Becky's back. Yay.
Yeah, I was MIA there for a second.
You were frozen with your hand over your face. So that's kind of what we feel about the VA. We sort of put our hand to our face and we go.
Take two on that one.
I don't know. I'm keeping that. That's gold.
Come on.
That's gold.
For the highlight reel.
But we're gonna jump into more of the VA. We're gonna focus on that next week with someone from the VA. Ask some just basic questions because I believe part of bridging this divide is discussing pieces of the military culture that are confusing. I personally, I know nothing about the VA. I know they do benefits. You can go to them as a veteran and get health services, but that's kind of the limit of my understanding. So we're gonna do some research this week and bring it to you, our audience, next week. But talking about that military-civilian divide, jumping into our main topic this week, we always say this, military-civilian divide, we say at the beginning of every episode. So what does it mean? We talked a bit about it, I believe, in our first season, but I think it's worth repeating. I think it's worth us discussing what that is and whose responsibility it is to bridge that divide and how we do that. We all know that there's about 1.3 million active duty personnel in the Army. That's less than 0.5% of the US population. Now, a lot of people would say that's a problem with the all volunteer force. It's a volunteer force. You volunteer if you want. You don't have to serve if you don't want. But that has created this divide. That has widened this gap about what our knowledge is about the military because we don't have mandatory service, like Becky mentioned earlier. Because we don't have any connection with the military if we don't want it. Otherwise, we're just seeing it on the big screen and we think our veterans are all action heroes. But I kind of want to open this up to everyone here in the group and talk about what does a military-civilian harmonious relationship look like?
A harmonious military-civilian divide is one where the civilian population has an understanding of what the military service was and what that person has done and sacrificed for their country, and additionally, that they have some sort of buy-in or skin in the game as to what that sacrifice was. I'll give you a quick example. Every year we meet with some Israeli veterans who were injured and they come to Pittsburgh. They have a partnership there and we sit down and we talk with them. And it's really interesting to hear their stories because everyone in Israel serves. And essentially everywhere in Israel is a possible front line for conflict. And so when a person has a bad day or has a breakdown or doesn't understand, like literally anyone in the community can go to that person and genuinely say, I understand what you're going through, and can assist with that because they are in danger, almost every day, and they understand what that person is going through. They understand what military service is like, and they understand what that person has sacrificed for everyone, for the community.
It's a great example. I think a lot of people hear about Israel's mandatory service, and that if you've gone through any sort of training, you do have that sort of basic knowledge where you could connect with veterans, connect with active military personnel, and sort of have an idea, an understanding of what they have gone through.
I think it's apparent as a civilian with a brief history with the military, what we are lacking as civilians and the knowledge of the military. I didn't understand until 2004 the significance of taps. I didn't understand necessarily the significance of the national anthem at sporting events. And you can tell that in our society that there is less than 0.5% associated with the military because when we were pre-COVID, when we're at a sporting event during the national anthem, how many people were still getting a hot dog at the concession stand and milling around the concourse and not paying attention to the fact that our national anthem is playing in the background. And it's been over the last 16 years that I've realized the significance of that. But prior to that time, would I have paid attention at the concession stand line during the national anthem? Probably not. But now I do. And it, you know, you hear taps, and 20 years ago, I thought taps was played primarily during the lowering of the flag at night. And you just don't realize the significance of it until it hits home.
I'm going to agree with her because I did not grow up in this is not a negative statement. I didn't grow up in small town America, so I didn't get to have the up close and personal view. I apologize, my dog is barking. Shh. I did not get to have the up close and personal view of, flags everywhere and the ceremonies and parades and the people in the community all wearing their caps and all wearing their jackets from all of their organizations that they have become a part of. So for me, my connection with the military was actually when I went in the military. But even then, I didn't have a reverence for it. So until after I left and I matured. Mm-hmm. But I will say that for the military and civilian divide, I think when you coexist together and it's not one is better than the other, there's like a gratefulness and an appreciation for what they did. But there's also I'm coming home to then be a part of the community, not necessarily for the benefits, not necessarily for all the accolades, but I was a part of the community before I went in the military. Mm-hmm. So when I come back, it's like a re-entry for them, but it's also a re-entry for the community as well. They're not sure how much and how much reverence and how long they should be, honoring you. And so I think the teachings and events like this help people to understand, okay, not what can I do? What can I do next? What can I keep doing? Because it's not all on one individual. It's on the community to honor. So I may do something this Veterans Day. Someone else may take the helm and do something for them the following Veterans Day. I did write that, unfortunately, some veterans walk the earth like gods, because they have the qualification to get in, they have the sacrifice that they made on behalf of the country, whether or not it was in combat, and then they have the elite training and the occupational field that when they come out of the military, they just climb up. And so they never get to be back into the community that they came from. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
there's this elite trajectory that takes them here. So humility is not something that they're accustomed to. And then how do we, the civilians, even a veteran, relate and communicate with someone who has this eliteness about them, mm-hmm. and they wear that well, but that's not where the rest of us are.
I don't know if humility was a part of our JJ Did Tybuckle. Maybe to add that.
I don't think so. Compassionate wasn't on there either.
But education is, I think, a huge piece of this. Education is enormous. And whether it's like I have an interest in military culture, I want to learn about conflicts that we've been in. I want to educate myself about where the veterans have come from, where they've served, what their MOS was, what they did, what their job was. I think there's a genuine sort of interest in those topics. In my life, I feel like that helps to bridge that divide because I take the time to learn about these things. That's something I think a lot of civilians may benefit from. And it's an interesting question that I heard last week was how do we get civilians to care about this divide? And there were two answers that I heard that brought up discussion. And one was patriotism. feeling a very big sense of patriotism. I want to learn about it, or guilt. I didn't choose to serve, and I feel guilty for that. So I'm gonna use that as my motivation to learn more about it. And I figured I'd throw those two terms out there to see if you guys have any thoughts on those ideas.
I believe, yes, I think that's correct. And I think Haya brought up a really good point about, where she came from and how she joined the military, right? I think we have a bad assumption that all the people who volunteer to join the military are evenly dispersed throughout the country, right? They're not. There's a disparity, especially in socioeconomic status of who joins the military, right? Like people, it becomes a manner of economic advancement rather than the pride of serving or whatever. So for a lot of people who join the military, it's because that's their way forward. That's their way out of a bad situation. And those people tend to then, if they do go back to their communities, are going back to those same communities. So you'll have other communities that don't have a very large veteran representation at all. So that contributes to the military civilian divide. So how we man our military has a direct influence on the, then how we have a military civilian divide and where those military civilian divides are more prevalent than other places. And, I think that there is a lack of understanding. And I think that permeates all manners of life. I think the fact that the global war on terrorism has gone on so long and very few people's lives have changed significantly in any way. They have most people have not had to make any sacrifice for that. Unlike in World War II, when you're buying bonds and you're rationing and all those things, like most people's lives didn't change at all. So I think that's a massive contributor to the military civilian divide, that we were able to, conduct this long, expensive war, and nobody back home really had to sacrifice at all.
And I don't know that guilt. I don't see any guilt among people. You would think, I mean, like Ryan said, we've been in this global war on terrorism for decades now, and the numbers for enlisting aren't going up. So if there was a guilt feeling associated with it, you think more and more people would be enlisting. And among my peers who are civilians, I don't think I've ever once heard one person say in the last, 20 years since September 11th, oh, I wish I would have joined the military.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I remember when I was a brand new sergeant and I got put on recruiting duty, high schools weren't even letting us in to talk to people. Right? This was in 2007.
Well, that's,
I was a brand new sergeant. Nate
was a recruiter in 2002 and 2003, right after September 11th, and he hated it because it was a numbers game and nobody was enlisting.
Even in 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
That's very surprising.
Yeah.
Because 2001, September 11th, you'd think from that, I think there was a surge in enlistment, but I guess it had already tapered off a year later.
Yeah, he had a hard time. And maybe, it was in the North Hills where maybe a lot of kids were going to college instead or something. I don't know, but he had a terrible time making his numbers.
Certainly, I think
that's a more affluent area. There's more wealthier people in that area. So again, going back to the socioeconomic situation, if they're going to go to college, if they don't need to join, why would they? So, I do think that there's still quite a bit of patriotism in America and a willingness to serve. You're definitely going to have those people, but I don't think that it's viewed with the same esteem that it may have been viewed with before. And I think that's because, and that's not necessarily the fault of any young teenager. I think that it's not news anymore, right? It's been going on so long. It's just kind of background white noise.
Yeah.
One of the things that I tried to teach the elementary school children when my daughter was in school here is that, it's the country is not just land. The country is our people. So when we say I'm fighting for my country, you're fighting for the people that inhabit that country. You're not fighting for a piece of dirt that there's nothing on it that's living and breathing.
Mhm.
So we may not agree on all points, but we agree that we want to continue to live in this space and feel safety and security about it. And of course, I said elementary on purpose because when I began to talk to the kids in middle school, I got a little bit more honest with the details, right? Because I couldn't, for lack of a better word, couldn't terrorize the children, you know, with what was happening in war and in combat. But once they entered, I went into middle schools, I began to show them pictures of paralyzed American veterans, disabled American veterans, showing them the effects of war and not trying to bridge with peace. And so you know, that point is, when we say patriotism, it means different things to different people. We can look at a Webster definition, and then we can look at our grandfather's version of telling us what that is. And it may not be exactly the same. And if fear is at the root of it, I don't think it's good to begin with.
There's definitely no easy answer on how to continue bridging the divide.
Yes.
But I think I do think you bring up a great point in just this fact of storytelling and education. And you know, that gives me a moment to toot the Veterans Breakfast Club and the idea that part of our mission is doing that, getting veterans to tell their stories so that we can educate. So if it's something that our listeners here are listening to, like, what can I do? What can I do? You know, a lot of times it might just be listening to what's going on in the military space, checking some headlines. You know, if you read the paper, or you go through, you know, any of the news websites, look for specific military headlines and see what's going on in Afghanistan at this present moment. You know, look up veterans in your area, organizations, and see where maybe they need some assistance. That way you become another person that is educated and you can tell more people about it. And that sort of, I think, continues to branch and help out this relationship. So for the sake of time, we're not going to be able to solve the divide today, but we are going to jump into our scuttlebutt round. And we're going to start with, I heard something about soldiers drinking antifreeze. Is that right, Ryan?
Oh yeah, I think 11 soldiers in Fort Bliss, Texas, got sick from drinking antifreeze in the field. Now, there are layers and layers to this story, but first of all, you're not supposed to drink alcohol when you're in the field in the military, right? But we have an expression that says, Joe's gonna do Joe things, right? Joe's gonna be Joe. And Joe is, you know, the privates and the lower enlisted of the military in general. So I really want to know, like, were they tricked into drinking this, thinking that it was something else, or did they know it was antifreeze and drink it anyway? Just because I've seen people do some stupid things to change their state of mind. That's especially in the military, that's for sure. But are you familiar with the term sick call? You know what sick call is?
I'm not.
So sick call is your first sergeant comes out every day and he tells you like the hours and the location for sick call, and that's where you go if you're not feeling well. You show up at the medic's tent and he looks you over and gives you some ibuprofen and some water and sends you on your way, right? But you're not going. You have to pass several gates to get there, right? You have to talk to your squad leader. You have to talk to your platoon sergeant. You know who's going to send you to sick call, and y'all better be dead. You'll be dead and dying if you're going to go to sick call, right? Because we can't afford it. We're not just going to. You're not going to get a day off. You're not just going to run off and mess around all day in the medic's tent, right? So these guys must have been so sick. They get past there and then immediately get to sick call and then get sent to the hospital. But I can't imagine what would bring a person to drink antifreeze if it was in fact intentional. I don't know.
Well,
Becky,
wasn't the intention it was alcohol that they thought it was alcohol that happened to contain propylene glycol, which is the main ingredient in antifreeze. I know here in the United States several years ago, the cinnamon whiskey Fireball there was question as to whether to take it off the market because it contained traces of propylene glycol. Not easy to say. But yeah, I mean, I know in England, they pulled it off the shelves because of that. So, I mean, I guess from this article at Fort Bliss, there were several soldiers that were critically ill, and I think at least one was intubated. So it was pretty serious stuff.
So I can imagine that there's a person driving around Fort Bliss right now just making mad money off of soldiers in the field, because every time you go to the field, there's always somebody who drives around. It's like, we call it the gut truck, right? Or somebody who's willing to deliver you pizza or sell you a Gatorade for $10 or something, right? Because soldiers in the field are desperate for anything. So somebody, probably drove up there and said, "Hey, you guys want
here's some whiskey?"
Yeah, sure. Here you go. Right? That guy's like, he's laughing all the way to the bank, right? He bought $5 worth of antifreeze and sold it to soldiers in the field for probably $200 or something.
If there's a bit of antifreeze or a fraction of this in Fireball whiskey, I'm going to echo what I said in season 1 about Rippets, is how much Fireball is too much Fireball, and how much Fireball do you need to drink to get antifreeze poisoning?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not willing to take the test.
So there's no such thing as too many Rippets, but there is such a thing as too much Fireball. It's called one. Proper way to drink Fireball is just to pour it down the drain.
Yeah, save your money.
Anything that burns my throat. I mean, even a new soda. If I don't let it sit and fizzle out, anything that burns my throat, I don't want it.
Give me fresh water every day. And Becky, you found a great headline from New York Times about Captain Tom Moore. His passing, turned 100 years old. He raised a ton of money in the UK. He's a veteran, and he walked around his garden 100 times as a fundraiser.
In honor. He wanted to do a fundraiser for the British healthcare workers, because they had taken care of him a few years prior with a broken hip. And so he wanted to walk around his garden 100 times with his walker and raise money for them, expecting to raise about 100 or 1,000 pounds, or I don't know the
conversion rate.
Yeah, I don't know the conversion rate for pounds versus dollars, but it turns out he raised, I've read a couple different things. One thing I read, he raised $36 million. Yesterday on the news, after his passing, they said he had raised $45 million for local healthcare workers during the COVID crisis. And he was knighted over the summer by Queen Elizabeth. And his 100th birthday in April, he received over 125,000 birthday cards. And he passed away on, I think, Tuesday at the age of 100. So kudos to Captain Tom.
Yes, yes.
Also, I think that's something we really need to, import from the old empire is knighting. I think we should have knights in America.
I agree. I don't want my knights just on a chessboard. I kind of like, I want to be knighted, but that's every little boy's dream of like King Arthur and being knighted. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I like that the money he raised was not for maybe a building or structure, but it was for people who are currently, and with that kind of money, going forward, to be able to support them, maybe even with resources, supplies, things of that nature. That it's not just getting his name on a building.
We're going to find a lot of, in the coming years, I'm sure, a lot of civilian veterans of the pandemic. That we will probably need to dive in stories there, because a lot of what they're experiencing has been pretty horrific. And there's going to be a lot of, I'm sure, trauma coming from the pandemic. But yeah, our first responders certainly deserve all that they can get for what they've had to deal with over the last year and a half. We want to end on a pretty cool note, as you guys will all be listening to this on Monday. Last night was the Super Bowl. Tom Brady might have won it. Probably. We don't know. But what we do know, we hope not.
You hope. You hope.
Greatest quarterback to ever live, and I would not have said that a year ago when he played in the AFC, but he now is because he plays for Tampa, and it's like, the NFC, whatever.
It's just,
I know. Everyone, you hear Tom Brady in here.
Body
well, and it's just, and it's the fact that Antonio Brown would get a Super Bowl ring also that just.
I do agree
is
with
disheartening.
that.
Yeah.
I do agree with that.
I'm sorry, but oh well.
But we should honor James Martin, who is a co-host here in the Scuttlebutt, a Pittsburgh native,
Cheers
a
to
veteran.
James.
Cheers to James. He was honorary captain of the Super Bowl. You may have heard a thing or two about that. We're hoping to have James back on the Scuttlebutt to tell us the whole story of how he got selected, the excitement of being in Tampa, who he met, who he, had drinks with. I'm sure there's a Scuttlebutt episode upcoming where we get to dive into that whole story, because that's pretty big nationwide news and something that we just have to salute James for. Congratulations on being named honorary captain, one of the honorary captains of the Super Bowl.
Yes, congratulations to James.
Congratulations, James.
So that does it for episode 2 of the Scuttlebutt. We thank you all for joining us. Again, please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for us. We always want to hear from you, so please comment. We will be back in episode 3 for our talk about the VA. Hope you join us for that. And there's a lot more to come from the Scuttlebutt this season, and including Ryan Ahl. You'll be hosting an episode talking about PTSD. It's a topic that we've wanted to discuss. We also do want to dive into 9/11 movies. We found a lot of people like talking about World War II movies, but the post 9/11 movies, there's some good ones out there. There's also some really bad ones. But we would like to have an episode on that. So if you have any suggestions on movies that we need to watch, or ones that you just absolutely despise, please let us know. And otherwise, this is Scuttlebutt signing off.